And it's heartbreaking for these businesses. It's virtually every store was hit in some parts. And I was speaking to someone earlier, Zenda, who I'm going to bring in. She was going on a neighborhood walk this morning. And Zenda, I'm so happy we met. What was going through your mind as you're walking through your neighborhood?
Well, I'm so sorry. I was just crying and bawling as I walked around the corner and saw you guys here. I was crying because I go for a walk every morning, and when I walk across 3rd Street and Fairfax and Melrose, the visual representation of what I saw was what I feel eternally every day I walk out of the house. That's a visual representation of what I feel like you have to put on a suit of armor in order to go out into the world. And when I walked around the corner, Christina, and saw you guys here, I was in the middle of crying because this young brother right here, this Black-owned business, Mr. Mitchell, my maiden name is Mitchell, my son is Mitchell, and if I had spoken up 20 years ago, instead of worrying about my retirement or worrying about my job or what people had to say, this brother wouldn't have had to go through this. The looters wouldn't even exist if I had said something, if I would have spoken up. So my message is, I don't look like my picture. A friend of mine sent me this beautiful sermon as I was on my walk. And the name of the sermon the title was, "You Don't Look Like Your Picture." And I just implore everybody, you, Kristina, David, wherever you are, say something and do something. Don't be so worried about what it's gonna look like or your career. And, Colin Kaepernick, when he took a knee, he was braver than I was. The looters, as horrible as they seem, wouldn't exist if I had said something. And so today marks the first day that I'm going to say something. I'm going to tell all my friends to say something, my family members to say something. I know lawyers and doctors and teachers, and we're not all out there like the media represents us to be. But the very least we can do is say something. I like to say there's this quote, it's not about what you know or who you know, it's who knows you. The world needs to know that we exist. And now is the time. All this time I was afraid of losing this or losing that. And the reality is, it didn't even matter. So we have to say something. And again, I want to find out who Mr. Mitchell is. I have a son named Mitchell. My maiden name is Mitchell. And I just think it was divine intervention that I apologize to you, Mr. Mitchell, that I didn't speak up 20 years ago when I got my bachelor's degree, when I got my master's degree, when I got my doctorate. I didn't speak up so you wouldn't have to go through this. So I am not my picture, but going forward, I will speak my truth.
Zenda, you are just amazing. That is so powerful and inspiring. Thank you for sharing that so powerfully and speaking your truth. What would you say to your 21-year-old self?
Say something, do something, be authentic. And everything you do, be authentic. Don't do anything that goes against the grain of future generations.
And what would you say to the looters and the people who, because let's make a distinction here. The protesters are not the looters. It was two different groups of people yesterday. We saw it ourselves. What do you want to say to the people who are looting?
What I would like to say is I'm sorry, looters. Because if I had spoken up 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this wouldn't exist. There would be no looters, in my opinion, if I had spoken up.
Where do we go from here?
Speaking up and taking action, building parks and schools where teachers and administrators and superintendents care about the children that they serve. Stopping this cradle to prison pipeline. Making sure that we treat children, all children, like we treat our own children.
Yeah.
Treat people like you want to be treated.
Education, fighting ignorance. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
You were amazing.
Christina. Thank you, David.
It was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice meeting you.
And let's talk. Don't go anywhere.
Okay.
That is Dr. Zenda Mitchell Abbott.
Boom.
Thank you for speaking to us. Boom, she says.